Captain Wilhelm Kruger heard the sound at exactly 2:17 a.m., not the whistle of artillery, not the drone of bombers, something else, something wrong. A wet, heavy splash against the outer wall of his bunker, like someone had thrown a bucket of water against concrete. Then another splash, then 12 more in rapid succession. He walked to the observation slit. The night was black, no stars, no moon, just darkness and the distant sound of the Rhine River below. Then he smelled it, gasoline, strong, chemical, everywhere. And then he saw the light. A single tracer round arcing through the darkness like a falling star. It touched the wall, and the night turned into day. March 23, 1945. The western bank of the Rhine River, Germany's last natural barrier before the industrial heartland, the fortress position of Wesel. Captain Wilhelm Kruger commanded Bunker Complex 7, a reinforced concrete position built into the hillside overlooking the river crossing. Behind 8 feet of reinforced concrete, he commanded 340 men, veterans, not the teenage conscripts filling German lines everywhere else. These were professionals, men who had survived Normandy, men who had survived the Ardennes, men who understood that this position, this river, was Germany's final chance. Kruger was 41 years old, too old for frontline combat by most standards, but he had earned his position through 26 years of service. He had fought in Poland in '39. He had commanded a company at Dunkirk. He had survived the Russian winter of '41. He wore the Iron Cross First Class. He had shrapnel scars across his back from a Soviet mortar attack near Kursk. He was not a man who broke easily. His bunker complex was a masterpiece of German defensive engineering. Multiple layers, interlocking fields of fire, machine gun positions covering every approach, artillery observation posts with direct phone lines to the heavy guns 2 kilometers behind the lines, ammunition stores built deep underground, medical facilities, sleeping quarters for the men, ventilation systems designed by the same engineers who had built the U-boat pens on the French coast, thick concrete walls that could withstand direct hits from 155 shells. The Americans had been probing the position for 3 days. Artillery bombardment, sporadic, testing, learning. Kruger had weathered worse. His bunker had taken 17 direct hits on March 21st alone. The result? Dust, ringing ears, minor structural cracks in the outer layers, nothing serious, nothing that threatened the integrity of the position. By the evening of March 22nd, Kruger felt what every professional soldier feels when they occupy strong ground with good men. Confidence, not arrogance, just the calm certainty that comes from preparation meeting experience. He had calculated the mathematics carefully. The Americans would need at least a full division to crack this position. They would need days of bombardment. They would need direct assault by infantry supported by armor. They would bleed. They would pay in casualties. And by the time they broke through, if they broke through, reinforcements would arrive from the east. The position would hold. He was making the same mistake Andreas von Koltitz had made at Saint-Malo 8 months earlier. He was preparing for the last war. He was calculating based on physics he understood. Concrete versus steel. Kinetic energy versus structural integrity. He did not know that the Americans had spent 8 months perfecting the weapon that had broken Saint-Malo. He did not know that they had built an entire tactical doctrine around weaponized chemistry. He did not know that, at that very moment, American engineers were preparing something that would make the Saint-Malo attack look like a field test. The sound started at 2:15 a.m. not overhead, not from artillery positions kilometers away. Close, very close, the sound of engines, multiple engines, low-flying aircraft. Kruger went to the command post. His spotters were already calling it in. Aircraft approaching from the west, flying low, unusually low, perhaps 800 feet altitude, descending further. Kruger grabbed his binoculars and moved to the observation position. Through the darkness he could see them, twin-engine aircraft, P-38 Lightnings, but something was wrong with their flight profile. They weren't bombing. They were spraying like crop dusters, like agricultural planes spreading pesticide over fields, except they weren't over fields. They were over his bunker complex. They were over his men. The first splash hit the western wall of Bunker 7 at exactly 2:17, a wet, heavy sound, not the sharp crack of an explosion, just a splash, like someone had thrown a large bucket of liquid against the concrete. Then another, then another. The aircraft were flying in formation, each one releasing its payload as it passed overhead. Hundreds of gallons, thousands of gallons, a continuous rain of liquid falling from the sky. Kruger couldn't see what it was in the darkness, but he could smell it. Thick, chemical, overwhelming, not quite gasoline, something heavier, something that clung to the air like oil. His men in the outer positions were reporting the same thing, liquid covering everything. The walls, the gun positions, the firing slits, the ventilation intake vents, everything was soaked. And then came the tracer rounds. The Americans had planned this with precision. The spray aircraft had marked the target. Now came the ignition. Standard tracer ammunition fired from aircraft flying behind the spray formation. Nothing special, just phosphorus-tipped bullets that glowed as they flew. Except when those tracers touched the chemical-soaked concrete, they didn't bounce off. They ignited something. The explosion wasn't sharp. It was a rolling wave of sound, a deep, throaty roar like a furnace door opening. And then Kruger saw what 8 months of American chemical engineering had created. The fire was orange, not red, not yellow, orange, the color of molten metal, the color of blast furnaces, and it moved wrong. It didn't rise into the sky and dissipate. It flowed. It rolled across the concrete like burning water. It clung to the walls like burning glue. It dripped into the firing slits like burning honey. It spread across the ground like burning oil. This wasn't napalm as used at Saint-Malo. This was Napalm-B, the improved formula. Thicker, hotter, more persistent. It burned at 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit. It stuck to wet surfaces. It stuck to stone. It stuck to steel. It stuck to human skin. And it would not stop burning. Kruger watched the outer machine gun position go silent, not because the gun was destroyed. The concrete around it was intact. The weapon itself was undamaged. The position went silent because the 3 men manning it were no longer there. They had abandoned the position. They were running, and they were on fire. He could see them through the observation slit, dark shapes moving frantically in the orange glow. They were trying to reach the bunker entrance. They were trying to reach safety. But the fire that covered them wouldn't come off. It clung to their uniforms. It clung to their equipment. It clung to their exposed skin. One man tried to roll on the ground. The fire didn't go out. It spread. Another tried to beat out the flames with his hands. His hands caught fire. This is where Kruger's professional training failed him. He had been trained to respond to artillery. He had been trained to respond to infantry assault. He had been trained to respond to armor. He had never been trained to respond to men burning alive within sight of his command post. Men he couldn't help. Men who were beyond any help. The ventilation system betrayed him next. The same system that had kept his bunker complex habitable during 3 days of artillery bombardment. The system designed to pull fresh air from outside and circulate it through the underground chambers. That system was now pulling in something else. Smoke. Thick, black, chemical smoke. The fire outside was so intense that it was creating a massive updraft. The ventilation intakes, positioned on the surface to draw in fresh air, were instead drawing in superheated gases and toxic fumes. Kruger felt it first in his throat. A burning sensation, not heat, chemical burn. His eyes started watering. Around him, his command staff were coughing. One officer stumbled. Another bent double, gasping. The men in the deeper sections of the bunker were reporting the same thing. Difficulty breathing, burning lungs, panic spreading. A sergeant burst into the command post. The eastern bunker chambers were filling with smoke. The men were trying to seal the ventilation ducts, but the fire outside was melting the metal covers. The smoke was getting thicker. Some men had already collapsed. Some were unconscious on the floor. Kruger made the decision that every commander dreads. He ordered the men to evacuate the sealed sections, to open the heavy steel doors and move to areas with clearer air. It was the logical decision, the professional decision. It was also the decision that killed them. The moment those steel doors opened, the smoke didn't get better. It got worse. The fire outside had created a vacuum effect. Opening the interior doors created a draft that pulled even more smoke into the previously sealed chambers. Men who had been breathing contaminated air were now breathing smoke so thick they couldn't see. Men who had been coughing were now collapsing. Men who had been standing were now on the ground, gasping, clawing at their throats. The medical officer reported to Kruger, asphyxiation, not burns, not shrapnel wounds, not trauma, asphyxiation, chemical inhalation, oxygen deprivation. The men safe behind 8 feet of concrete, the men protected from artillery and bullets and bombs, were suffocating. Their fortress had become a gas chamber. Some men panicked. They tried to reach the surface. They opened the exit doors thinking fresh air would be outside. The smoke outside was worse than inside. The fire was still burning. The heat was intense enough to make breathing impossible even without smoke. Men who stepped outside collapsed within seconds. Some crawled back inside. Some didn't make it back. Kruger realized with absolute clarity what had happened. The Americans hadn't been trying to destroy his bunker with 3 days of artillery. They had been forcing him to seal his men inside. They had been conditioning him to trust his concrete walls. They had been teaching him that survival meant staying underground, staying protected, staying sealed. And then they had attacked with a weapon that turned his fortress into a trap. The reports came in rapid succession. Western bunker sections evacuating, casualties mounting. Eastern sections requesting permission to abandon position. Northern gun emplacement silent. Southern observation post not responding. Medical facilities overwhelmed. Ammunition stores inaccessible due to smoke. Command and control breaking down. At 3:45 a.m., Kruger made the decision that ended his military career. He ordered full evacuation, all personnel to abandon the bunker complex, all defensive positions to be vacated. The fortress of Wesel was no longer defensible. It was a death trap. The men who could still move began the evacuation. They wrapped wet cloths around their faces. They moved in groups, supporting the injured, dragging the unconscious. They emerged from the bunker complex into a landscape that looked like hell itself. The fire was still burning. 4 hours after the initial attack, the napalm was still burning. The concrete walls glowed orange in the darkness. The metal equipment had melted into abstract shapes. The ground itself seemed to be on fire. Kruger was one of the last to leave. He walked through the bunker one final time. The command post where he had studied maps and issued orders. The sleeping quarters where his men had rested between watches. The ammunition stores that were supposed to keep them fighting for weeks. The medical facilities built to treat wounded from artillery bombardment, not chemical warfare. All of it useless now, all of it obsolete. He counted the survivors as they assembled in the designated rally point 500 meters from the burning complex. 47 men, out of 340. Some were burned. Some were coughing blood. Most were in shock. They were the remains of a veteran unit that had held against 3 days of conventional warfare and had fallen in 4 hours to industrial chemistry. The bunker complex burned for 11 hours. The napalm fuel was finally exhausted by 1:00 p.m. on March 23rd. When American engineers examined the position afterward, they found something that would be reported up the chain of command all the way to Eisenhower himself. The concrete was intact. The structural integrity was sound. The bunker could have withstood another week of artillery bombardment, but the interior was a tomb, bodies of men who had suffocated. Equipment that had melted, ventilation systems that had become chimneys of death. The fortress doctrine, the idea that strong fortifications with good men could hold any position, died at Wesel. It died in the smoke and fire of March 23, 1945. Kruger had learned what von Koltitz had learned at Saint-Malo. That courage means nothing against chemistry. That concrete means nothing against weapons that don't need to break walls. That professional training means nothing against tactics that invalidate everything you've learned. Kruger spent the final weeks of the war in a field hospital, being treated for chemical inhalation and severe burns. He had time to think, time to understand what had happened. The Americans hadn't defeated his fortress with superior numbers. They hadn't defeated it with better tactics. They had defeated it by making the entire concept of the fortress obsolete. They had weaponized fire itself and turned Germany's strongest defensive positions into ovens. By April 1945, the German army had completely abandoned fortified defense. Every bunker complex, every reinforced position, every concrete strongpoint was considered a trap rather than an asset. The age of the fortress was over. The age of industrial warfare, of mass-produced chemical weapons, of tactical doctrines built around weaponizing basic elements, had arrived. The fall of Wesel was proof of something that would define modern warfare forever. There is no position strong enough. There is no wall thick enough. There is no engineering sophisticated enough to protect against an enemy that has the industrial capacity to mass-produce chemistry as a weapon. The side that could turn laboratories into assembly lines, that could turn scientific research into tactical reality, that could weaponize fire itself, had won. Kruger survived the war. He returned to a Germany that didn't exist anymore. He never spoke publicly about March 23, 1945. He never wrote memoirs. He never gave interviews. But those who knew him said he would wake up at night smelling gasoline, said he couldn't stand being in enclosed spaces, said he would walk outside in the middle of winter to breathe fresh air, even when there was no danger, even when there was no smoke, even when there was no fire. The bunker complex at Wesel still stands. The concrete remains. The walls that were supposed to protect 340 men, the fortress that was supposed to hold the Rhine, it's empty now. A monument to the moment when industrial chemistry defeated professional courage. A reminder that in modern warfare, the strongest position is the one that becomes obsolete first. Thanks for watching World War II Ember. If this story resonated with you, if you want to understand how industrial warfare changed everything we thought we knew about combat, hit that like button and subscribe for more forgotten moments when history turned on a single tactical innovation. Drop a comment. Had you heard about napalm being used at Wesel? What other forgotten battles should we cover? Your support keeps these stories alive for everyone who wants to understand how modern warfare truly evolved.